Well, hello and welcome to Show Me the Money Rugby League TV. And as always, do give us a like and a subscribe. And of course, you will get a notification when our Rugby League content drops. So we might have neglected League One and the Championship because we have done quite a few full 80 minutes and full 80 minute extra shows where the sprinkling of our encyclopedic rugby league knowledge and opinion has gone on those sort of Super League and wider game issues, but we are firmly looking at League One and the Championship on this sort of special kind of extra show for those supporters of Championship and League One. And we're going to start with League One. Obviously, we're doing this ahead of the round 7 fixtures, which sees North Wales against Whitehaven, Dewsbury against Rochdale, Newcastle against Goole and Workington against Swinton. There has been the sad news of the demise of Cornwall. That could be a whole show on itself. Clearly sad times for everybody concerned down there at Cornwall. Unfortunately, they've not been able to make it work. There was rumours of an 11th hour investor or someone certainly potentially coming in to save the day, but as we found out a couple of weeks ago, they were due to play North Wales Crusaders in Colwyn Bay, and unfortunately they pulled the plug. So it was quite a sombre and sad piece of news from Rugby League League One circles. Well, we'll just start with the League One, and we are going to work our way up to the Championship. So when you look at League One, because obviously there's been the Cornwall situation, because clubs are having the buys similar to the Championship, we have a table which has some teams who have played 6 games, some teams who have played 4 games, and some teams that have played 5 games. So it's quite difficult to kind of gauge just where everybody is at, but we can tell you the top 4 currently when we do this show are the Midland Hurricanes, Whitehaven, North Wales Crusaders and the Dewsbury Rams. Now, when we did our preview, certainly I backed Mark Dunning and the Midland Hurricanes to be in there to finish in the top 4. I certainly had the Dewsbury Rams in there, pipping a number of clubs into 4th spot. I did have the Keighley Cougars in there. They're not in there. They've played 6, lost 6. So they're one of the clubs with the greatest disadvantage as we move on to the sort of like the third way point of the League One season this weekend. And then what's interesting is, because there's only a point separating those 6 clubs from Midlands right down to Swinton, you've got Swinton, you've got Rochdale. There's a lot of competitiveness, a lot of competition, and as we've seen from the weekend's fixtures, that great Workington Town victory over Whitehaven in front of the largest League One crowd of the season, 2,310 at Derwent Park, which is good to see. It shows the value of potentially the strength of the 2 West Cumbrian teams in Whitehaven and Workington, playing out a real sort of intense derby classic there. But Jimmy, we'll start with your views on League One. Obviously, Midland Hurricanes, they suffered their first defeat of the season at the weekend against North Wales Crusaders. A lot of people looking at North Wales potentially as the most sort of serious threat, serious challengers to Midland Hurricanes and Mark Dunning's aspirations of getting Midlands in the top 4.
Yeah, I went down to that game. I thought, going into the season, I kind of had Midlands and Crusaders as probably, I felt, the 2 strongest squads. Everybody involved thought Keighley would be significantly higher, and I don't think many wouldn't have had Keighley in the top 4. And they still could do it. They need to go on a serious run, but Killshaw's in charge now, and he's getting his feet under the table and trying to sort a few things out. And I won't put it past him to go on a big run. But as we've said from day one, the competitiveness this year in that league means teams will continue to beat each other, with respect to Newcastle, except Newcastle. Now Cornwall are gone, there's really only Newcastle who are who were way off anybody else, and then I don't think there's an awful lot in the rest of the clubs, certainly at full strength. So yeah, that game I'd had it booked in and I'd look forward to it, because in my head it was a 4-point title game, and it was a game of two halves. We saw the best of Midlands in the first half and the worst of Crusaders, and then in the second half we saw the best of Crusaders and the worst of Midlands, and it just shows there's going to be plenty more twists and turns as the year goes on, because there's again, other than Newcastle, there's no easy games. It's never been more competitive. So other than Keighley having such a dreadful year so far, the other surprise for me is how well Whitehaven are doing. Yes, they were a relegated team, and as always, lots of people in the bookies thought that Whitehaven, Dewsbury, Swinton as relegated teams, they were all in the top 4 shortest odds before a ball was kicked, probably along with Goole, with all the hype around Goole. But knowing what's gone on at Whitehaven and Anthony Murray going in there with only one player still on the books and starting from scratch, rebuilding these strained relationships with local amateur clubs who for a while had not really wanted to get involved with Whitehaven for previous political reasons. He's done all that, got a team together, found some diamonds from the amateur game, sprinkled in 1 or 2 with League One experience, and I genuinely thought he'd done enough to not finish in the bottom 3. I did not think he'd done anywhere enough to have a team that would be sat where they are, and are continually proving that they haven't just got lucky, they're just backing up result after result after result. And that, even the Workington game at the weekend, in my head, I thought I've got Workington as being top 4. I still think they'll probably get in the top 4. But they've gone toe-to-toe with them, so there's no sign of them slowing down, and they're going to be another team like Dewsbury, who have put, March has got a really good side together playing well, Swinton on the day, Goole on their day. There's so much competition going on, and it's making for a very exciting season, and with it being, you know, the top 4 is the goal to get into those middle 8s if they don't change anything, then it's all to play for. There's no real dominant force like we saw with Oldham last year, and we've seen with other teams in the past when Keighley had that amazing year. It's really close, and if you look through the results week by week, there's so many 1 point, 2 point, 4 point games, which is brilliant.
It's great for League One. One club you didn't mention there, Jimmy, was Rochdale Hornets and the good work that Andy Maisie and everyone's doing at Rochdale. They, of course, had a great Good Friday win in front of a very healthy 4-figure crowd at Spotland. Very tight, tense game. And, you know, to reiterate your point, a lot of games are decided by 1, 2, 4 points. Well, look at that. Rochdale Hornets 8, Swinton Lions 7. And
this was had a couple of brilliant weeks with Rochdale. They started the season off unbelievably well, didn't they? By hammering Keighley
in game 1.
Keighley
46-0.
Big favourites to win the league.
Huge statement win.
Hammering. Big statement win. They hammer at Cornwall, and then they have a couple of tough results. I think they got beaten in Whitehaven, which they would have been able to win. So it almost went from being, what an unbelievable start, everyone thinking, well, they're nailed on top 4 based on this start, to just hit the rocky patch, and got quite a few lads at Rochdale. We were just a bit nervous that they really needed to win that game with Swinton. With what happened at Cornwall, which, like you say, is a show on its own, because unless something changes very quickly, there's going to be an awful lot of fingers being pointed at one man because of how things have been done, the lack of transparency, how members of staff and players have been left in the lurch with no notice whatsoever. Even people like John Beach, who's put his blood and tears into that club over the last few years, just absolutely hoodwinked. And the plug pulled, the rug pulled, all of it, bang, gone. And lads left with no clubs, They've got overseas players who've come over, given up things at home, and horrendous. Like I say, we could do 2 hours on it and my blood pressure would be higher than it's been for any topic in rugby league in the last 2 years. One of the nice little outcomes of that was, I believe that nearly, if not all now, Cornwall players who needed and wanted to find a new home have done. And 2 of them being the Simpson brothers, 2 Australian lads who've been at Cornwall, one Darcy for all last year, and Elijah's brother came over for this year. What Rochdale have done for those 2, since we first had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, to getting them moved over there with accommodation, jobs, and Elijah goes on his debut and scores a try in the derby. It's been an absolute fairy tale couple of weeks. Andy Maisie, Gary Thornton, and a couple of the other people involved there have been unbelievably good. I've literally seen the 2 sides of rugby league in the space of 7 days there.
The bad, the ugly,
the worst thing, one of the worst things, if not the worst thing I've ever seen.
The mismanagement of Cornwall to the flip side of Andy Maisie and
I don't think they'll mind me saying this. It's unbelievably rugby league, but it's so good. These 2 lads need somewhere to live. They're Aussies, they've come over. Their accommodation's going to run out in Cornwall because the owner
disappeared.
Like, unbelievable. Andy Maisie and his mate, who's a sponsor, over the weekend, they buy a caravan, a static caravan from Morecambe. They have it shipped over to Rochdale. They're putting it on some land. They're doing it all up. These 2 have now got somewhere to live from next week. They've put them up in a hotel for now. The best and the great things about rugby league, looking after people on the back of one of the worst things I've ever seen or had anything to do with. So, that's a little fairy tale ending for those lads, and they're going to help Rochdale, I'm sure, continue their journey to being in that top 4, because if we stick with these middle 8s, they're totally stacked in the championship team favour, aren't they? The way the fixtures work, and the championship teams only playing League One teams, and only the top 3 out of the 8 will remain or be in the championship next year if there's no merger, etc. But you never know, do you? We've seen enough surprises with teams sneaking out of League One into the championship over the years. So all to play for, unbelievably competitive. You can never really predict any result, with the exception of Newcastle. So yeah, it's
just on 2 of the clubs in the bottom 3, bottom 4. I don't think many people. I know Goole Vikings are a new entity, a new club, certainly in the semi-professional rugby league pyramid. Of course, Goole Vikings have been in the amateur game, the community game, for many years. They had their first win at Keighley on Good Friday. A game that could have gone either way. It was 24 points to 18. We'll talk about Keighley just a moment, but on Goole, they go to Newcastle this weekend.
Yeah.
And I know this show's probably going to go out and there might be some results from this weekend's games. We're not sure when the show's going out. We're doing a pretty much of a kind of like sort of first third of League One kind of review of where everyone's at. You'd expect Goole to double down and build on the back of that first win. Because even though Keighley have been very, very poor, very, very disjointed, there's been a lot of change with Jake Webster going and Alan Kilshaw coming in, and the Jared Samet experiment failing spectacularly, and players in, players out from Warrington, from Leeds, from anywhere. Obviously they've got Sam Ackroyd now from Bradford, but certainly from a Goal point of view, a lot of people had them in that top 4. And there's a chance now for Scott Taylor and Goole to try and build some momentum on the back of a very, very good result. Their first actual league win on Good Friday at Keighley, Jimmy.
Yeah, totally. I think the way they started, everything about Goole so far, they've done it so well. They've created excitement. They've created hype. They had a couple of good results in the pre-season and a good cup result with London, obviously, an unbelievably good result.
Which probably did heighten those expectations.
It literally banged
artificially, yeah.
Yeah, I think so, because we know there was lots of other factors with that London team on the day, and it was the perfect storm for Gould to be seen as, oh my God, these could be the real deal in the first year. But we know how hard it is in the first year, and like pretty much every other League One team, there is not an awful lot of depth. And it just takes a bit of time. All these teams in League One, 2 or 3 injuries can make them 20 points worse, than what there would be on a full strength day. So probably the perfect time to play Newcastle, because they get another 2 points, and then next thing they're out the bottom 4 and they're sitting mid-table. They're only 2 points off top 4, and they will undoubtedly believe, and rightly so, that they can still get in the top 4. As can any team except Newcastle. And that's the exciting thing. So I'm sure they'll go up there, get the win, get a bit of mojo, and crack on. That'll be their aim to... The hype's calmed down, they've settled in. There's not probably as much pressure and attention on them now as there was at the start. And they can try and have a good little run now and put themselves in striking distance of that top 4, because, like I said, I kind of think that Midlands Crusaders are the strongest teams. I believe Workington are the next strongest overall, but there's not much in it. And everyone else, Rochdale, Dewsbury, Goole, Swinton, don't even want to miss anybody out, Whitehaven, they're all well and truly in with a shout.
The worry for Keighley, because of Cornwall's demise, they've played 6. It's now an 18-game season. 12 games. That's 24 points. The challenge facing Alan Kilshaw and Keighley to even get anywhere near the playoffs is I don't think Keighley can afford to lose another game, Jimmy. I firmly believe, because Midlands on 9, we're at a third way of the season. Yeah. Whitehaven on 8, North Wales 8, Dewsbury 8, Swinton 8.
Well, and North Wales are on 8 after 4, so you can safely put Crusaders on at least 10 really now, and possibly even 12. So I suppose a good way to do it is, if any of the top 5 win half of their remaining games, they're going to be another 12 points better off. So you kind of think you're going to need 20 points to get in the top 4. So based on that,
they have to go on an unbelievable run.
They can maybe afford to lose 1 and probably 2 at the most. Weirdly, and I've been saying this for a long time, I genuinely think they can do it.
Wow.
I genuinely think that they can go on a huge winning streak. And the other thing in their favour is, as we've said, I'm convinced all of these teams will keep nicking points off each other. No one's going to blitz it. Crusaders, Midlands, they will win for me the vast majority of their remaining games, but they don't need to worry about them. Top 2's gone. They just need to sneak 4th. And if these teams keep losing, winning, they might need 18 points. And that's probably the thing that's going to excite Kilshaw, because if he pulls this off and he gets them singing a tune, it would be a hell of a comeback and a hell of a second half or remaining 2/3 of the season. What they can't afford now is injury problems, and they've already got them. They've lost Lewis Hatton, as good as any of their middles. They've lost Adam Ryder. These sorts of players who provide experience and are proven and are top level League One players, and if anything, Championship players. For them to do this challenge without some key players, even getting a couple in from here and there, it's going to be really difficult. So they need everything to go their way, because with those two on a quite a lengthy layout, they're really up against it. If you could, ridiculous as this is, if you said that Keighley were going to be at full strength, or he was going to certainly have everyone at his disposal for the rest of the season, I put them in the top 4.
Big call.
But you know, that isn't going to happen. We know it's not going to happen already, and they could easily have more injuries. So a hell of a challenge on. But ultimately, getting in those middle eights, stacked in championship teams' favour, is it wise to start looking at the longer term now anyway? With talk of this potential merger of League One and Champ coming in as early as next year, and probably almost definitely the year after, do they start to think, well, do you know what, let's just start a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan?
Yeah. Well, I had a League One coach on the phone on Monday, and he's asking me what's going on, and I'm like, no one knows at this moment in time. There's the murmuring that at the July council meeting there'll be papers on the ballots, or should I say the ballots, the agenda. There will be perhaps a motion to restructure the Super League from 12 to 14, potentially merging Championship and League One, because as we've said on the full 80, we're hearing there might be another League One club in trouble who might decide to leave at the end of the season. You've already lost Cornwall. If Super League expands to 14, there's a lot of if buts and maybes, but you can understand why, coaches are phoning journalists and broadcasters and trying to, find out which way the wind's blowing, because we are heading towards that 1st of May, where...
Is the 1st of May the date where Nigel and his team's review findings will be discussed and decisions will be made?
Well, you're not going to see any decisions made in May. The clubs have to vote for it.
Yeah, but potentially proposals.
Yeah, because we've had a meeting in Batley, we've had a meeting in Widnes, there's been meetings in St Helens. If people think that there's a lot of people sat around doing nothing, let me tell you, there's a lot of people out there who are an absolutely root and branch reform, and this covers the match officials. I was talking to someone from the implementation committee on Saturday afternoon after the Lee Warrington game, and I know we are going back to League One and Championship, don't worry, but the fact you're stopping the clock for captain's challenges, you're stopping the clock for tries, the game is going on an extra 10, 15, nearly 20 minutes more, it's not polished, it's taking the energy, the drama away, you're waiting for decisions. Trust me, the implementation committee, Jimmy, they're looking at everything. They're looking at everything from match officials to structures, what is the optimum structure? In Super League, what is the optimum number of teams and structure below? So there's a heck of a lot going on behind the scenes.
I do feel there's a lot of confidence from all quarters that good decisions are going to be made, and that I feel that clubs feel they're being listened to,
and that's the key.
And as much as anything, I feel that Championship and League One are going to be looked after, whether it's merging them, having conferences, or keeping 2 separate divisions.
Yes.
I feel that they're going to be looked after and thought of, rather than, for many years, it seems it's 98% of focus has been on Super League, and you guys will chuck you a few quid here and there. You'll be lucky to get one player with that money, in League One or even in Championship. It's not going to go far. Good luck. The strong will survive, the weak will struggle. We'll let it sort itself out. Whereas now I feel that they're going to listen and give... All I want to see is opportunity, that if there is chairman and investors who want to put money into a Championship or League One team, they believe that there's a pathway.
Yes, there has to...
I can't think of anything worse in our game of there being people who are interested enough and passionate enough to invest their own money into a club, but feel that there's no point in investing more or to the next level, because what are we playing for? Yeah. What's the point? And I'd love to see a structure and a system which, for me, has to have promotion and relegation, and it has to have real opportunity of being able to get to the promised land or get from League One to the Championship. This year, League One clubs, it's so hard for them to get into the Championship next year if it stays that way. And I don't feel that's enough motivation and encouragement for some owners to invest more money than they are doing. And if they're willing to do that and wanting to do that, that's fundamentally wrong. We should be able to say to anybody, well, if you invest and if you make your club better and you entice and recruit better players and you win that league, you're up. And I hope we move back to something more like that.
Is that what the clubs are telling you, or your opinion, Jimmy? Because if I've got it right, you're saying you don't think the Super 8s, obviously Featherstone. I'm going off the current table here. So what we're saying is, you're saying Midlands, Whitehaven, North Wales, and Dewsbury wouldn't fancy the chances against a Hunslet, Sheffield, London, or Featherstone.
What I've just said is very much my opinion, more as out of principle. I feel like promotion and relegation is absolutely essential at that level. I know that Super League gets very complicated and there's other things to factor. I still would always like to see a system where if you win a league and you come top of a league, you should be going up to the next league.
Tend to agree.
If there's the financial element, I don't want to see, if for example, a championship club came top this year, let's say Halifax continue this amazing season so far and win the championship, I'm not saying that they should definitely go to Super League, but if the club and owner said, we have got investment and we have got £1 million together to have a go, and they've got the financial capabilities of competing, then of course let them go. The difference between League One and Championship in terms of spend, it is not that great, is it? The top end of League One is usually in line with a number of clubs in the Championship.
Yeah. So Midlands, probably the highest spenders in League One, probably would be certainly on par, in my opinion, with a Hunslet, a London, a Batley.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's one or two other League One clubs who are not far off. Certainly, so there's probably, the good thing about the middle eights is, and it was I've been ranting about it for a while, because this year it's only the top 3 out of the 8 that stay in the Championship.
Yes, correct. Yes, because they are. I mean, again,
because
they're trying to equalise 12. Yeah.
Now, the fixtures are also weighted in the Championship team's favour. So it's going to be unbelievably hard this year for a League One team to beat 2 or 3 Championship teams minimum to get into that top 3. And it's been troubling me for a long time. However, it was a League One chairman who said he understands that, but if we do keep Champ and League One going forward as a structure, and then these middle 8s become the top 4 survive, then the pathway is a lot easier for them to get up. Yeah. And it allows clubs to build more gradually, rather than if it's the top team that goes up and everyone else unlucky, it might encourage teams to overspend and try and almost think, well, let's spend double what anyone else is spending in. And then you can have this arms race like we saw with Lee and Fev in the Championship for a while, and it can leave the loser in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
No.
So he actually changed my mindset about the middle 8s from next year onwards. This year I don't like it. 3 teams, it's going to be near impossible for a League One team to go up. Whereas going forward, if they decide to stick with 2, I quite like it. And maybe they need to sort out the fixtures a bit so it's not massively stacked in the Championship team's favour. But then you could easily say, well, if a League One team is definitely ready for the Champ, they need to make sure that they absolutely perform in those middle 8s and prove that they're more than good enough, rather than maybe getting lucky. That's a big thing for me. I always go back to League One playoffs are exciting, but it's very rare for a League One team to get through the playoffs into the Champ and not really struggle, because they're so far behind the 8 ball with recruitment.
Well, you've seen that with Hunslet and their achievements. They're probably, Dean, when you speak to Dean, the head coach of Hunslet, he always believed they'd go to Keighley, and then whether it was Whitehaven or Swinton or whoever, he always believed. But, on the back of that, they couldn't really start planning any Championship recruitment until, of course, they had that result at Haywood Road, that amazing win.
Which is too late, and it's happened in the years before. It's like, well, even if Hunslet had trebled their budget going into this year, which is probably Hunslet I'm quite certain got the lowest budget in the Championship. London's a bit more complicated, but even if they had double that money to spend, there's so few players still available at that stage
of the season. Yeah,
you know, I think they had a really good crack, and I think they've done some really good recruitment, and they took a couple of younger players who have serious potential, and I think they've done a valiant job, and they were rewarded with their first win last week, weren't they? And that was great to see, because lots of people didn't give him a chance of winning a game.
Well, funnily enough, in one of my championship shows I do on Facebook, I actually said last week, I said, if there's ever a game that Hunslet are going to win, it is probably this one, because Batley, they've had a very tough game against London. They've come, I know the travel aspect is immaterial, but they've gone down to London, they've had a tough game. It's a short turnaround, Sunday to Friday. Hunslet had the extra, Hunslet had the extra days because they played the Halifax on the Friday. And they had a couple of, I feel so sorry for Hunslet. I've got quite a few lads there, and as a company we have a good number of lads at Hunslet this year. They've had injury, they've had more than their fair share of bad luck with injuries, so Hunslet always needed a lot of luck with the injuries and suspensions, so that they could get their strongest side out consistently to be able to challenge. And they've not had that so far. Let's hope that they've turned a bit of a corner. It was the perfect storm for when they played Hunslet. But Hunslet, they still had a 24-point start on the bookies. They still were massively underdogs. But maybe that's just giving them a bit of confidence to believe. And I think they have Widnes this week. No, they've got the bye, Hunslet.
Oh, so maybe the next game's Widnes. So these two games, like you said, were ones where if we're going to start winning, these are two teams that can be vulnerable when they're not on a good day. So, but going back to the original point, it's so hard for teams like that to do panic recruitment and try and mix it. And then it makes them hard to recruit. So you can imagine the situation Hunslet are in now, trying to recruit for next year. How do they keep players? How do they attract players when
there's so many
we could flip a coin for what division they'd be in next year? And it makes it really hard for teams. So let's hope that the structures they come up with and the systems allow clubs to plan longer term and plan their timing and have a 2-year plan, 3-year plan, that we can get into the division above and compete, rather than winning a massive one-off game or getting through playoffs and then be like, what do we do now? So...
Well, I'm probably the opposite of you, Jimmy. I'm led to... I know we haven't done the championship yet, but from what I've seen of Featherstone, they won't be in the bottom 4, but...
No.
If you're a Midland Hurricanes and you're Mark Dunning and, your Whitehaven, even Dewsbury Paul March, if Keighley and Alan Kilshaw pull off one of the great rugby league comebacks and get Keighley in the top 4, which would mean and indicate Keighley have so much momentum going into these Super 8 fixtures. I'm actually looking forward to Midlands hosting Hunslet, potentially Midlands against Sheffield, London going to North Wales in a do or die game, and because these games will be after the championship playoffs. Or whilst the playoffs are going on, I'm looking forward to really looking forward to attending and covering a few of these games, because I think it'd be absolutely, it's almost like going back to what we had previously before the Ian Lenihan power grab, where the Super League clubs decided there's too much jeopardy on them, so we're getting rid of the Super Ace. But
and don't get me wrong, I am too. I will look forward to when I'm enjoying, because that there's a chance. There's always a chance. Like you say, a couple of the teams, the way the Championship League's shaping up at the moment, which we'll get onto shortly, there could be a couple of teams in that bottom 4 who are on a really bad trajectory, and there could be injuries, and there could be poor negative mindsets against a League One team who are busting full of life and excited, and all that can happen. But my original point being that these championship teams play the League One teams predominantly at home, so can a League One team beat a championship team, yeah, but can they beat 3 of them? You know, and I feel that they pretty much need to win 3 out of their 4 games to get in. You know, not even 2. So that's where it's like, yeah, there'll be excitement, but it's so stacked against them.
I agree, but I think you might be surprised.
Yeah, you can see one of them winning 3 out of their 4 games.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Well, I hope you're right, because I probably have been too negative towards the system, but
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a breath of fresh air, and you know the eights should never really have gone in the first place. But that is where we are. With League One as things stand. North Wales, they've only played 4 games because obviously the Cornwall game didn't take place, so they're currently the only undefeated team. And they, in my opinion, are going to be the most serious threat to the Midland Hurricanes, who I said in the season preview would be up there. I'm glad Dewsbury and Paul March are having a good season for Mark Sawyer and the Dewsbury Rams, because one thing I will say about Dewsbury Rams is every time they have been relegated recently out of the Championship into League One, they have bounced back and with their performances, certainly. I know it was Newcastle Thunder who were really doing it tough. That the second season after Seymour Curdy had removed all his funding, but you know, to get a good, it was 40-0 at half time. You know, that's going to please Paul March. You know, great performance, and to see everything gelling together,
and some really savvy recruitment from Paul March. I mean, he's managed to get the 2 McShane brothers.
Yes, really impressed with
who have been.
They've been playing for Dewsbury Shawcross in the NCL, and the Hunslet.
But Craig, for many years, the older of the 2, and you know, Paul's younger ones, he's been a player that League One clubs have been trying to get older for years, and then his younger brother Jack has been a standout player at that level for the last few years as well. So for him to land them both, the number of League One coaches who said to me, "Oh wow, you know, I've tried to get him numerous times, you know, and his timing couldn't have been better. He's landed him. They've made a big difference to them. You know, 2 players like that in their spine, and for me, that's the difference. I didn't think Dewsbury, with respect, after having so many changes, losing so many key players,
you had them a bit further.
I didn't think they could get him back top 4.
Yeah.
Whereas now, by whacking them 2 in, and clearly March are creating a good, positive, you know, environment. For me, they've got as much chance of getting him back 4 now as any of the chasing pack. So, yeah, fair play. There's a lot of good, positive stories coming out this year in League One.
Well, that is League One. We are now going to move on to the Championship. Well, we're now moving on to the Championship. We've just had a little bit of a forensic comb in League One. The Championship this weekend will be at round 8. Similar to League One, it will be at the 3rd way mark of the season. And certainly there have been a number of surprises, certainly similar to League One, that have happened in the Championship. So this gives you a little bit of an overview where the Championship season currently is. Obviously, clubs have the bye weekend. There's 13 clubs. So again, very similar to League One. Some clubs have played 5, some have played 6, some have played 7. That will equalise as the season continues, but we do have a top 4 in the Championship of Halifax, Oldham, Barrow, Bradford, Toulouse and Widnes. We've then got York, Doncaster and Batley. A win just outside the playoffs, or a win just in front of the bottom 4. That's how tight and crazy and unpredictable the Championship competition is, let me tell you. Of Featherstone, London, Sheffield, Hunslet. We've already done Hunslet, and they're, even though they had that good win against Batley on Good Friday, there's still that kind of. I know Dean Muir and his players will be saying, "Look, we can win our way out of the bottom 4." Considering, you know, a number of Championship teams that are having a little bit of an indifferent season. You know, you look at Sheffield for one, who would have had Sheffield Eagles and Craig Lingard on just one win from their opening 6 games, and London after that sort of good start to the season where they pushed Bradford all the way in round 1, and then they had that round 2 win against Featherstone, and then they got the second win of the season. They're, Mike Eccles and London doing it tough now. The injuries have started to bite, and as we say this, the investment hasn't come yet from Gary Everington and Matt Adamson. There's a press conference in the middle of May, we've been told, to attend, where obviously London's future and investment should look a little bit more rosy and clearer. And as we said, Featherstone, in the other club in the bottom 4, who had that good win on Good Friday with a strong second half performance against York, who had, or appeared to be, putting some wins together and generating some momentum. I know a lot of people are going to look at Halifax top of the table. They had their first defeat of the season against the Bradford Bulls, but for mine, as somebody who has been in the Championship now as a working journalist, working broadcaster for the last 11 years, I look at one club, and one club really does stand out at me, and that is the Barrow Raiders, because for the last 2 years, Barrow Raiders under Paul Carey, they have survived in the Championship by just 1 point. Let that sink in. Barrow, it's gone right to the last day of the season. Last year, it was obviously Whitehaven who went down. Last season before, it was Keighley who went down at Barrow's expense. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I've watched a few of their games. They had a good win on Good Friday against London. London showing that improvement, but as we said, very, very slow. And I think Mike Eccles will be a little bit annoyed with some of the errors that his side gave, which he classes as cheap field position, which allowed Barrow to score those points. But, when you look at Barrow, we know already this season they've beaten Oldham up at Craven Park. They've gone to Odsal. They've beaten Bradford. They've beaten London. They're having an absolutely barnstorming year. And I guess you've got to say, Jimmy, just those 2 defeats, they've been ultra competitive in pretty much every game. And, I think they are, for mine, alongside Halifax in equal measure, but because of where Barrow have been in the last 2 seasons, they're challenging for the top 3. They're challenging for the top 2. And, this weekend they've got Doncaster, which is a massive 4-pointer, because if they can get another win, they're up to 12 points, potentially, the second in the table. Unbelievable. And, when you look at that team that Paul Carey has put together, there's been limited change, if any. It's a very, very settled side, a lot of endeavour, a lot of effort. And for mine, because we always suspected Halifax, if they keep players fit, which, touch wood, they have been up until around about now. But, Jack Hansen missed Good Friday because he was there at the bedside of his partner who was giving birth. But, Halifax, we always said they'd be challenging for the playoffs. They'd be in the playoffs if they kept everybody fit and healthy. But Barrow, when I think back to the preview, Jimmy, we were, with the greatest respect to ourselves, we've called this one horribly wrong.
Oh, yeah.
We might be proven right, who knows? But from what I've seen of Barrow and the performances and their ability to get those results, what they have done, I mean, that performance against Widnes last week, the weekend previously, unbelievable, to upstage Doug Lawton's kind of memorial game, and the way Paul Carey has them playing smart, expansive, attractive rugby league football. Barrow, for mine, get that kind of accolade.
Yeah.
So we'll start on those 2.
Yeah. Well,
Barrow first up.
I totally agree with you. I mean, Halifax, I as I did in our preview and banged on about a bit, I strongly believed Halifax were going to shock a lot of people. And the start has been as good as I could have hoped for. They're looking at 6 wins out of 7. I remember saying to some of the lads there's no reason you can't win the first 6 and 8 out of the first 10 if you keep fit. And they have done. It's gone perfectly. Probably, who knows, that game on Good Friday was the weakest, in inverted commas, team they'd had out all year against the toughest opponents, I believe, and probably the toughest game that they've had so far. So, they weren't a million miles off being 7 out of 7. And probably more impressive is the way they're playing and how convincing the wins have been. They're not scraping through games. They're being convincing. So full plaudits to everyone involved with Halifax. And you said about Barrow on the back of a couple of bad years. Halifax's year last year was awful for different reasons. Credit to Liam Finn, who put this team together and believed that he'd done some shrewd recruitment and was going to have a very different year to the year he had last year. Kyle's come in with his team and got him singing and got the best out of him. So there's been a lot of people involved getting this to where it is. And, as we said at the start and all the way through, they still need to ride the luck with injuries to be able to maintain even a top 6 place. But what they have done already is they've opened a 6-point gap to the chasing pack now. And in my head, if they have this 6-week period at some point where they lose 3 or 4 of their key players, they can ride it. And they're kind of doing so well that they've probably put themselves in a position that if they pick up 3 wins out of the next 5, which I believe they will, I think that we're talking about them being nailed on in the 6. When anything else
disagree with
is a
anything.
bonus.
Yeah.
And I know from, again, speaking to some of my players there is no... The way Kyle's doing it sounds brilliant in the sense. There is no anything but keep your feet on the ground. It's not like, amazing, look what we're doing, this is brilliant, we've done that, we've beat them, we've seen them off. It's just like, we can do this better, we can do that better. And they're clearly on a mission to winning it. They're not trying to finish top 6, they're trying to win the league. And I think they believe they can do it. And they all know at the back of their minds they need more luck than most clubs do with injuries and suspensions. But fair play. But ridiculously, Barrow for me as well, team of the season so far.
100%.
Because I thought Halifax could easily be doing very similar to what we're doing. Oldham, of course, they've spent a fortune, they've got a great team. We kind of had them in and around the playoffs depending on how it went. No real surprise. Toulouse, no surprise. Bradford, no surprise. And then Widnes are a point within 3-4 other teams. But Barrow, to go to Odsal and pump you, and to go to all...
I wouldn't say they went to Odsal and pumped Bradford.
What did they beat you by, 14 or something?
No, they beat Bradford by 10. And it was only... It was a Jada knocking ball knock-on 5 minutes from the end, which decided that one. Okay. It was a very close, tense, competitive game.
I'm getting too carried away.
Yeah, that was not a pumping.
To go to Bradford and make the bookies wrong by 40 points is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it shows you. It shows you what they can do.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, Bradford must have had a terrible day, and Barrow have had a really good day.
Bradford did have a terrible day.
But still, me being a bit disrespectful to what Barrow were capable of, and then they do it again, and I'm like, hold on a minute, are they the real deal? I'm speaking to Charlie Helmsley at Barrow, saying like, what have you boys got going here? Because nobody had them outside the bottom 4, except for probably themselves.
Yeah.
So not only are they doing well, they're actually, like you say, they're doing it in a really good style. And this is not a fluke anymore. After 7 games, you're not there by fluke. This is, and they have played some of the top teams. Yeah. So all credit goes to those boys and what they're doing. And again, a bit similar to Halifax. They now need to not do anything amazing to stay in the 6, which makes teams like Widnes, York, Featherstone, Sheffield, who would all have been
in the mix, which we put them in the mix,
before the start of the season. Now they're going to have to start looking, thinking, we're actually quite a few points behind 2 teams who not many gave a chance of getting in the 6, and it just makes it even more... This playoff race that we knew was going to be unbelievable, and it still will be, it's turning out even better than I thought, because we've got 2 teams up there who we didn't think we would be, and as we'll get onto in a second, we've got 2 teams in that bottom 4 at the moment who should never be really outside of a top 6, but there's a few reasons why they are, and it's shaping up that bottom 4. I mean, We did say Hunslet and London have got an awful lot of obstacles to not be in that bottom four.
Correct. We had them both in.
And I don't think we're changing our views on that.
No.
Unless London do get a lot of investment and go bang, bang, bang in June, July and start changing their fate. But I would not really want to call... I mean, I'd probably stick with my original predictions of the bottom four, but Featherstone and Sheffield, for me, the most important thing is how quickly, if at all, can Sheffield start to close the gap on the 6. I think Featherstone definitely will. You know, I still think Featherstone will get in the 6, but like I say, Featherstone are 6 points behind Barrow.
Well, the crazy thing about the Championship as we head towards the third way mark, third way part of the season is, you know, York outside the playoffs, Featherstone outside the playoffs, Sheffield outside the playoffs, you know, and clearly their places are being taken up by, as you said, a very strong, you know, absolutely fantastic season that Halifax Panthers are having. And then, as we said, Barrow, looking at Toulouse and Bradford, who we said at the start of the season,
top three.
I felt, personally speaking, Toulouse were favourites. They are spending the most money, 1.8 million euros. That is a gargantuan amount. It's a hell of a lot more than anyone else. They are the only full-time team. Yes, they have lost Callum Garn and Dominic Peru, but when I spoke to Sylvan Ules after they went to Sheffield, in a game that I thought was going to be really, really tight and close, but the class of Toulouse proved me wrong. Very rare the win there. First win there since 2018 at the Olympic Legacy Park. Sylvan Ules is talking about, you know, potentially recruiting further down the line, looking at Australia. So Toulouse are only going to strengthen, and they, for mine, are still probably the team I predict will finish top of the table. And, you know, after 6 rounds last year, they had only 2 wins. After 6 rounds this year, they've got 4 wins. So they're actually 2 wins ahead of where they were last season. And I know Wakefield last season ran away with it, but I don't think there's any doubt or any questions. Toulouse, in my mind, will be top of the table. And rightly so, they should be with the amount of money they're spending. Bradford Bulls, obviously, they had a very, very tough March after that unbeaten run until that game against Toulouse. And, you know, I think when you look at Bradford's season, they've won the last 3. They're slowly building that momentum, and that air of optimism is back around the club. And, you know, what I will say about Halifax and Bradford on Good Friday, nearly 5,000 there. You know, I was sat there with Matt Ellis, Richard Fulis. You know, that crowd and the atmosphere and the game itself, that would have been great television. Yeah. That would not have looked out of place in the Super League. And credit to Bradford, you know, that they've consistently taken large number of fans, and to have 2,400 fans there. I know some might say, oh, well, it's only 10 minutes away. But, you know, as Matt Ellis, Richard Fulis, they're all saying that is Super League support. And credit to the Halifax fans who came out. It was an absolute great occasion. And Halifax, you know, because of how well they're playing, they had that record share crowd. In terms of Bradford's season, there's only really been that Barrow game in round 4 at Odsal where they were beaten by 18 points to 8, where they've probably not really performed. You know,
to lose away.
It's very, very tough. Bradford have only had 1 league win there, whilst Toulouse have been here. And that was in 2019.
But it was, you know, we're talking near enough a scratch game. Toulouse slight favourites. Me tuning in thinking, this can't be anything but a close game. I couldn't believe the nature.
I must confess,
But I do think, in Bradford's defence, Toulouse were on it.
100%.
Everything we did was executed. And Bradford just got caught in a whirlwind, a bit of discipline. And I think they were shell-shocked.
Yes.
You know, and there's one thing being confident, and they should be confident because they've got a great squad together. And I think this is still my mindset with Bradford. I don't think Bradford's first 17 are any better than 6-7 other teams in the Championship. You might disagree. But you know what I'm saying. I'll rephrase it. Bradford's first 17 are no better than at least 4 or 5 other teams in the Championship. However, their squad depth is exceptional.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised. I never expected Bradford to blitz the league and start hammering teams left, right, and centre.
No one said that. Brian Noble said pre-season. He says we are going to lose a number of games.
And I think that Halifax have been really convincing in some of their wins, and Toulouse have been convincing in some of their wins. But I think Bradford are a side which will continue to win games and win a lot of games narrowly and not particularly attractively. But they are going to always have that extra depth where they can replace quality players with quality players and not have that period of 4 or 5 weeks where they're running on empty because the depth is so good. So I'll tell you what I think quickly on the Bradford situation. I had them finishing top. When we both said, Bradford. I
had them second.
Yeah. But I think Halifax go to Toulouse maybe in 2 weeks. I think that's a massive game for me because if Toulouse beat Halifax at home, then Toulouse become favourites for me. But if Halifax beat Toulouse, I think Bradford are favourites, and I don't think Halifax come out with that 6. So I think that's such an important game. Halifax can't afford to lose momentum, but for Bradford, if Toulouse lose 1 or 2 more at home, I kind of think, Bradford become favourites to win it. But let's not rule out Oldham, eh? They've had some weird results, and yet they're still sat in second place. And I think there's the best of them is yet to come.
Yeah, and that's what I'd say about Bradford, Jimmy. Brian Noble's always said, even after the Halifax game, he says round 8, 9, 10 is when you're going to see it. And I don't think the injury to Tom Holmes has helped, because you've then brought in Luke Cooley, so you're changing that spine, and that obviously takes time to gel. And I did an interview with Luke Cooley.
And match the other day, did he?
Luke Cooley?
No. Did he get man of the match against Halifax?
No, Reid Bidoro got man of the match. Right. But the thing what really kind of hit me with Luke Hooley was because obviously he's come in because of the lengthy injury to Tom. That spine and that cohesion doesn't just appear overnight. But what I will say is, don't discount the cup effect of what happened with Bradford because. Yeah. A lot of people do look at Bradford and they think they're spending silly amounts, gargantuan amounts. They are effectively a part-time team. So when you are playing 3 Fridays in a row, your training schedule for those games goes out of the window. And I think that's where Barrow, I'm not saying got lucky because Barrow capitalised on a very rare situation where Bradford have gone to Toulouse, they've then played Salford and they've caught Bradford cold.
Yeah, 2 big games which took
a lot out. And I spoke to the players, and I don't like hearing excuses, but what you've seen probably in the last 3 weeks from Bradford is that 48 probably in the second half against Sheffield, you've seen that sort of ruthless streak. And if Brian's right that they are going to hit this form, then who knows, Jimmy? You might be right, I might be wrong. At the end of the day, no secret, I'm the Bradford fan who's actually put Bradford second, and you've put Bradford top. But on to Oldham, they've been ruthless, very, very similar to Halifax in those games they were expected to win. Like Halifax put 50 on Batley. London went to Oldham and got beat by 50. But then I was at Featherstone against Oldham the other week, and that's probably the worst I've seen Oldham play all season. But because of Featherstone's inability to convert the conversions, and yes, some of them were tough for Ben Reynolds, Ryan Hampshire and Danny Addy.
They missed 5 conversions.
Six. So
even if they get half of them.
When you speak to Sean Long after that game, he's using that monopoly get out of jail term. We have used it in this game. We haven't been at our best, but yet we've somehow come through. And one thing I'll say about Oldham is they are very, very formidable at home. They've not suffered a defeat at Boundary Park since 2023. Very similar to Bradford and Odsal. I know they have had that one defeat this year against Barrow, but Bradford, Toulouse, Oldham, their home form is going to be absolutely key for them being in that sort of top 4 where they want to be. Obviously, IMG points are at stake, crucial IMG points. But quite rightly, with what Oldham's recruitment and what they've managed to do, you'd expect Oldham to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the only question that we both had, and I think we both had him just in or just out, right on the edges, is how do they find that first year in the champ and the back-to-back tough games?
Yes.
Now, so for me, I expected Oldham to be probably a bit more mid-table at the moment while they acclimatised. Whereas because they're already up there now, I don't see them coming out of that 6. I don't see Bradford coming out of the 6, and I don't see Toulouse coming out of the 6. But the real question is, for me in that 6, can Halifax hold on? Can Barrow hold on, which would be unbelievable? Can Widnes hold on? Because I had York in the top 3. I still think York can do it. I do think they had a rough start. They're getting better and better. And I still think Featherstone will get in the 6. So I'm looking at this now, and I'll tell you where I'm at, and I'll ask you the question. From what I expected at the start of the year, am I changing anything? and the answer is, and this is again very disrespectful to Barrow, is that I'm not really, because I think Halifax will hang on, and if they miss out, it'll be narrow, and I don't think they will. And I think York will get in there, and I think Fev will get in there. So I suppose Oldham with a team I had on the periphery. Sheffield I had just missing out, and I can't see anything but them missing out the way things are going. So brilliant start from Barrow. Oldham doing a bit better than I thought they would at this stage. Halifax doing the absolute best I thought they could do at this stage. But I'm not sure really come the end if there's going to be, if these teams can hang on. Can Batley and the Donnies, the teams I thought be mid-table, I've not seen anything from them that's made me think, wow, these can be in the 6. I still think they're going to be in that chasing pack, and if anything, get dragged into this bottom 4. So what about you? We've obviously talked about Barrow, but have you really got anything that's going to change how you see it as the year goes on? Do you think Sheffield can make the 6?
I've seen Sheffield a couple of times, and I think they are seriously underperforming.
And a huge game this Friday against Batley, because if they lose that,
yes,
it sounds dramatic, but season over, because they're not getting in the 6 if they lose.
But what I will say in Craig Lingard's defence, and this was my own sort of experience of going to Sheffield the other week, was you are taking over effectively a generational institution, because Mark Aston was there for 19 years.
And 19 years as coach.
He's still there now. Mark Aston was still there.
He's been there nearly closer to 30 years in total.
But what I'm saying, Jimmy, he was there on against Toulouse. So, Craig, when I spoke to him afterwards, he's well aware. He doesn't feel any pressure. He's wanting to thrive in this adversity that he's facing with some injuries. But he knew in his heart of hearts just how tough it was going to be going in and taking over from the Mark Aston era and trying to change things. And I don't think I'm speaking ill. There's been certain players who've put up a little bit of resistance to that change, who have obviously, some have been moved on. And that's that's natural. That's not just a Sheffield Craig Lingard problem. That happens at any club up and down the country.
But usually you're following a coach who's been there for a year or 2 years, and like you say, this is unique.
It's a culture shock. It's
like almost like trying to take over from Alex Ferguson. It's the only other thing I can think of in sport where someone's had the reins for so long and is still involved, like Fergie was still involved at United. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but more importantly, it was always going to be a big transition year.
Yes.
But with injuries and a few other factors, I think it's proving to be a lot tougher for Lingard to stamp his approach on things. The injuries have made it harder to get the team out he'd probably want having out. the strength of other teams in the league, all these things have collided that they've picked up a win against Fev when Fev were really struggling as well.
Correct,
we look back at that game now and
19-12,
you'd have been looking at that before the ball was kicked, saying this is a playoff 4-pointer, no doubt about it. And now we look at teams who've got 3 wins between them. So for me, this year now is all about planning and starting for Lingard and the future of Sheffield, if it's to be a 2, 3, 4, whatever reign of Craig Lingard, it's going to take time to change it, and if that's how it's going to be, he needs to start recruiting players and letting people move on. And it's going to be a huge transition, which is ironic because Sheffield have been one of the most stable clubs for the last 3 or 4 years. But, things out of people's control, it's changed and he's got a big job on his hands to turn it around. And I don't think it can be turned around this year to an extent that'll get him in the playoffs, because there's too many other quality teams who are already a number of wins ahead of him.
Are you saying Sheffield are going to be in that 3-team gap, which isn't in the playoffs and has avoided the relegation spots?
Well, I had him in that 3-team gap in the pre-season predictions. I had him just missing out on the playoffs because...
I did. I think I had him 7th.
Yeah, I think we both did. But now it becomes much more of, can they get out of the bottom 4?
Correct.
Because everyone will look at that Sheffield squad and go, of course we can. They'll look at the coach and go, of course we can. But it's not always as simple as that.
A lot of pressure.
There's a lot of pressure, yeah. and it's a very tough league to think, oh, well, we'll win the next 5, because nobody's going to win the next 5, almost definitely. And if anyone is, it's probably Bradford and Toulouse, so and it's going to be, this game on Friday is huge. It really is, because for me, you can't lose at home to Batley. They've just got beat by Hunslet.
You're playing one of those teams that are potentially or could end up in the bottom 4. So,
yeah. And it's no disrespect to Batley, because we always say Batley continue to deliver, but Batley have good days and bad days. They don't have a particularly deep squad.
Yeah.
Dane Manning, I've said it 100 times already, one of the, if not the top 5 most important players in the Championship for the last 5 years. And they're going without him for a period here. So if ever Sheffield want to play at home to Batley, they might not want to see him getting beat by Hunslet the week before, because we saw what Doncaster did after getting hammered. They had a reaction and beat Sheffield. So they need to be wary of the same happening again. But at the same time, this is a game that they should win. And for me, they have to win.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it so tough, and you'd like to think it couldn't get any worse. But if they lose to Batley, it just got worse straight away. Because like you say, you've given another team who could be in that bottom 4 another 2 points advantage over you. So, yeah, they're having a really, really tough start. And it's got to take, everything from Lingard to manage to change it around.
And just a little bit on Doncaster, obviously, they've had those back-to-back wins against Toulouse and Sheffield at the Keepmoat. They go to Barrow, and if Richard Horn and Carl Hall and Doncaster can get a win at Craven Park to make it 3 in the bounce, they lost to York in between, but didn't they? They beat Toulouse. Got hammered by York. I meant, sorry, at home, yeah. Jimmy. Sorry, at home. Yeah,
the home records got them out of trouble there.
They, for mine, are back in that sort of playoff mix if they go to Barrow and get that win. And they've had a horrific start to the season with injuries and not being able to get their best, anywhere near their best 17 out on the field. But one thing we can be assured, and we'll wrap it up here, is Bradford will recruit and strengthen. Toulouse almost certainly will recruit and strengthen, and as we've seen with Featherstone in recent weeks, Ryan Hampshire joining, and I'm hearing there's still some more players coming in at Featherstone. They will strengthen, and I wouldn't bet against either. a shock of Doncaster making the playoffs, or certainly Featherstone dragging themselves out of that bottom four and entering the top six. But we're only 7 rounds in.
Through.
We're up to round 8 this weekend.
Let me ask you a couple of quick fire now.
Yes, go on.
We've seen it. Featherstone, did we make the six?
Yes, they will strengthen and make the six.
It's a yes from me.
Yes.
Sheffield, did we make the six?
Nowhere near, no.
No, me neither. York, did we make the six?
I would expect York to make the six, yes.
Yeah.
Not top 4, they'll be 5th or 6th.
Yeah, I think York definitely in the six and still a very good chance of top 4. Will Halifax hold on and stay in the six?
Based on what I've seen, if, and I'll use an if here, if there's not seismic, and I mean if they were to lose a Woodburn...
No, don't give me any ifs. Let's factor in that they could have a bad run with injuries. We haven't got a deep squad. The St Helens relationship's working quite well, but how will that... yes or no?
I'd say, if we're not able to play out scenarios, I'd have to say based on merits of what I have seen, then yes, Halifax will just be in the six.
See, I think Halifax will comfortably in the six.
Yeah.
I'm because they've done so well so far.
Yeah.
I can just see them getting through this year with unbelievable good luck and hanging on, especially because they've gained so many points on a York and Featherstone, who, you know what I mean. Will Widnes stay in? Neither of us had Widnes in the six at the start of the year. Are we changing our opinion?
No, I'm not changing my opinion on that too. Still inconsistent.
I'm not changing mine, but what a brilliant point away at home to Oldham on Good Friday, because I thought that would be a game that kind of showed Oldham are a level above Widnes, but fair play to Alan Coleman. Widnes raised the game for the occasion. Yeah,
Widnes, from what I've seen of them, they're still in that sort of very inconsistent kind of mode, which I know Alan Coleman, they got them in the playoffs last year and they had that great run and they had the hoodoo over Bradford with those three wins in all competitions. But, you look... And I have watched the Widnes Oldham game as part of my commentary prep for the game on Friday, Oldham Bradford. But you still, Widnes bombed a couple of tries and just not seeing that level of consistency. But look,
do you know what? For one thing with Widnes, to be fair, a bit like what you said about Bradford, they had that huge cup game with Warrington.
Yes, it took a lot out of them.
And it did take a lot out of them. So maybe now they've got through that period as well and they can put a string together. But for me, they're still going to be a team.
Yeah, I'd just have Widnes missing out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Widnes were in ahead of York or even Doncaster were in.
Yeah, you still think Donny can do it, though? I think Donny will do well to...
avoid bottom 4.
Yeah, if I was a Donny fan and someone offered me that position they're in now, I'd snap her hand off.
8th, yeah.
Because, like I say, I do feel that, if it's going to be messy. So living up to expectations, absolutely. Neither of us are really moving off what we expected to see, but full accolades to Barrow. And if they get in the...
100%.
Well, the last thing I'll say on Barrow was it 3 years ago, their first promoted season when they finished 4th? Or was it 4? It might be 4.
Yeah, it was 4 years ago.
4 years.
But then, like I say, Jimmy, they've had the seasons where they've literally survived by 1 point in both seasons.
Well, what I'm going to say is sometimes in that first season, you can ride the wave and you can do really well. And then it gets harder and harder. That's why I'm still questioning Donny a bit, because that year too. If Barrow get in the playoffs this year and finish in the top 6, that's the best achievement they've done in memory for me, because I didn't see how they could do it, and if they keep this going, well, it'll be very, very impressive.
That's why there's no shame, and Barrow are the surprise package at this stage, and long may it continue. Right, Jimmy, thank you very much for that. We've done League One, we've done the Championship. Watch out for future League One and Championship shows in the coming weeks. Thank you. And don't forget, like, subscribe. And by the way, if you've watched, let us know in the comments who you think will be the top 4 League One, the top 6 of the Championship, and also the bottom 4 of the Championship.
And can a League One team go up?
Yeah,
is anyone going to keep helping me get more excited about the middle eights, fact that there is an upset on the cards?
Jimmy thinks not. I think there might be a surprise or a shock or two. Who knows? Let us know in the comments. Much love.